Hello student, Sacred Heart High School welcomes you. Today we are going to study in Science 2, Chapter 1, Heredity and Evolution, Part 3. In this part, we are going to study about Darwin's theory of natural selection, Lamarckism and human evolution. Now let's begin with Darwin's theory of natural selection. Charles Darwin had collected innumerable specimens of plants and animals, and depending upon the observation of those specimens, he published the theory of natural selection, which preaches the survival of fittest. For this purpose, Darwin had published a book titled Origin of Species. Darwin proposed the scientific theory of evolution, which is better known as the theory of natural selection. Darwin suggested that only the fittest can survive. Those plants and animals which are not fit for survival die. The fit species reproduces and pass on the relevant trait to the next generation. This process of selection of characteristics which contribute to the fitness for survival was termed as natural selection. According to Charles Darwin, there exists competition among individuals of the same type to survive. This causes the struggle for existence. As a result, the species that have characters useful for survival are selected and hence they survive. An organism which does not possess these characters and is not fit enough to survive die. This process takes place for many generations. After a long period of time, the species may be different from the original individuals of the same species, but if this changed species shows successful adaptation and growth in the given environment, then it gets evolved. This process of development of the species also can be defined as natural selection. Now we shall understand with a simple example. The event of industrial melanism is one of the phenomena which explains the natural selection. There were a number of white colored moths which camouflaged on the trees. The black colored moths were easily visible. After the Industrial Revolution, due to the deposition of the soot on the trees, the white colored moths were easily killed by the predators. Now, this is form of natural selection which favors the survival of the organism which can adapt to the surrounding. Now, there were few limitation objections to Darwin's theory. The first factor is Darwin had given the concept of variations, but he did not have any idea that how these variations arise in a population. He does not have any idea regarding the source of variations. He also not had any idea that how these variations are inherited or what is the mechanism of inheritance. Then the causes of slow and abrupt changes was not explained by Darwin. Next we shall see what is Lamarckism. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed principle of use or disuse of organs and theory of inheritance or ancestry of acquired characters. His concepts are known as Lamarckism. Every living organism tries to evolve. During its lifetime, it acquires certain characters through adaptations and modification. These characters are passed to the next generation. Depending upon the activities or laziness of that organism, these changes occur. So in other words, you can say Lamarckism is a theory of evolution based on the principle that physical changes in organisms during their lifetime, such as greater development of an organ or a part through increased use, would be transmitted to their offspring. Now we shall see few examples of acquired characters. Now, for example, for several generations, giraffe extended the neck for browsing on leaves from heights. Due to such extension of neck, giraffe became long-necked. Due to frequent hammering movements, shoulders of the ironsmith became very strong. Flightless birds like emu and ostrich have weak wings as they do not fly. Due to wading and swimming in water, the hind limbs of aquatic birds such as swan and duck became fitter for such mode. Due to burrowing habits, snakes lost the limbs. According to Lamarck, such aquatic characters are inherited by the next generations. Now we shall see the objections of Lamarckism or objections to Lamarckism. The view that unused organs degenerate and used ones evolve was accepted, but inheritance of such characters was not agreed by the scientists. For instance, we shall consider the example: the blacksmith's arm enlarges when used continually against an external resistance such as the weight of the hammer. If the effect were inherited, the smith children at birth would have unusually large arms, if not at birth, then when they become adults, even though they had not used their arm excessively. Thus, the other limitation is that Lamarck had told that acquired characters are inherited to the next generation, but he was unable to tell that how acquired characters get associated with the reproductive cells. The aquatic characters can't be inherited, and Lamarck was wrong in his concept of inheritance of acquired characters. So these were the limitations of Lamarckism. Next we shall next concept we shall see about speciation. Before that, let's understand what is species. Now we know that group of organisms that can produce fertile individuals through natural reproduction is called species. The process of formation of new species from earlier ones is called speciation. Now we shall understand this with an example. Now as you can see in this picture, there was an early fox population which spreads northward and southward and separates. Now, if you see that now both the conditions are different, like in northern and southern. So different environmental condition leads to different selective pressures and evolution into two different species. For example, the fox which moved on to northern are called as Arctic fox, and the fox which moved to southern are called as grey fox. Now, the Arctic fox, they are adapted to cold through heavier fur, short ears, short legs, short nose, white fur matches snow for camouflage. Whereas if you see the grey fox, they are adapted to heat through lightweight fur and long ears, legs, and nose, which give off more heat. Now next we'll see about the different types of isolation which give rise to new species. Now the populations which live in different habitat but they do not meet are called as habitat isolation. When there are little or no sexual attraction between males and females, they are called as behavioral isolation. Mating occurs at different seasons or times of the day, it is called as temporal isolation. When there are structural differences in genitalia prevent copulation, that's called as mechanical isolation. Male and female gametes fail to attract each other, that causes gametic isolation. Now we'll see, as you can see before you, the picture of seasonal isolation, wherein there are two types of the members of two population are reproductively isolated due to their adaptation to distinct climatic or temperature. Now example, as you can see in the picture before you, there are two frogs. The first brown color, that is wood frog, and the second one is called as leopard frog. Now the scientific name for wood frog is Rana sylvatica. Now it usually mates in late March or early April when water temperature is about 7.2 degrees Celsius. Whereas in the second one, leopard frog, the scientific name is Rana pipiens, it usually mates in mid-April when the water temperature is 12.8. Now these are the two factors which causes the seasonal isolation. Now the next you can see the reproductive isolation occurs when two populations evolve to the point that they cannot interbreed to produce fertile offspring. Now the third one is geographical isolation. Now this occurs by other physical barriers like rivers or mountains. So two populations are separated by geographical barriers like river, lake, canyon, mountain, range. So they cannot mate as different populations are adapted to different environment. Now next we shall see about human evolution. The biodiversity that is known today has been said to be formed from very simple unicellular organisms due to evolution. And in this evolution, origin of human evolution can be shown as per the picture you can see. We can just begin with the last dinosaurs disappeared approximately 7 crore years ago. At that time, monkey like animals are said to be evolved from some ancestors who were more or less similar to modern lemurs. Now, if you see tale of this monkey-like animals of Africa, it is said to be disappeared about 4 crore years ago. They developed due to enlargement in brain. Their hands were also improved, and thus ape-like animals were evolved. Meanwhile, these ape-like animals reached to South and Northeast Asia and finally evolved into gibbon and orangutan. Remaining ape-like animals stayed in Africa, and from them gorilla and chimpanzee evolved about 2.5 crore years ago. Now evolution of some of the true 2 crore year old species of apes seem to be occurred in different way. They had to use their hands more for eating food and other work. So those apes started to live on land as the forest started to decline due to dry environment. Their lumbar bones developed in such a way that they started to stand in erect posture in grassland, and thereby their hands became available for use anytime. These first human like animals were erect posture, which by using their hands have evolved about 2 crore years ago. Now, first human like animal is with us in the form of Ramapithecus ape from East Africa. Afterwards, this ape grown up in size and became more intelligent, and thus ape of South Africa evolved about 40 years ago. The morphology of these human-like animals started to appear like to be the member of the genus Homo about 20 lakh years ago, and thus scaled human developed. About 15 lakh years ago, human walking with erect posture was evolved. It may have existed in China and Indonesia of Asian continent. Evolution of upright man continued in the direction of developing its brain for the period of about 1 lakh years, and meanwhile it discovered the fire. Brain of 50,000 years ago, man had sufficiently evolved to the extent that it could be considered as the member of the class wise man. So, the Neanderthal man can be considered as the first example of wise man. The Cro-Magnon man evolved about 50,000 years ago, and afterwards this evolution had been faster than the earlier. About 10,000 years ago, wise man started to practice the agriculture. It started to rear the cattle herds and establish the cities. So cultural development took place. Art of writing was invented about 5,000 years ago, and thus the history had been started. Modern sciences emerged about 400 years ago, and industrial society was established about 200 years ago. Now we have reached to at this stage, and still we are searching the details of roots of human ancestry. So you can see before you how the development of the brain size had taken place during human evolution.